I would say that I'm a financial coach and CPA who focuses on the human behind the numbers. So, kind of going into my story, specifically, I was a teacher for 8 years. I was a highly successful teacher, loved my students, miss them to this day, but poverty sucks. And that led to a lot of fighting with my wife, that led to a lot of fighting, internally, not creating the home that I wanted my daughters to grow up in. And so having to then switch and become a CPA to go into the large corporations and the national, international accounting firms was part of that journey. And what I learned along the way was that the math didn't matter nearly as much as the person. And so, looking at how do we connect with this? So, for example, one of the things that happened, my wife was pregnant with our second kid. And I was like, hey, we are going further into debt every single month. We're not making it on my teacher's salary. I'm not quite there yet that I can make the jump into the accounting world. So we're going to have a budget. And I sat down with the numbers. I'm a really good number guy. Came up with all the numbers, sat down with my wife and said, all right, here's what we're going to do. Here's where we're bleeding. We got to reduce the grocery budget by 10%. My wife picked up a plate and spiked it on the floor. Like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to give us, what I'm saying to her is we need to be more financially responsible. We need to secure our financial future. That's what I'm saying. But what she's hearing is you're going to starve me and my children.
Yeah.
This is not a numbers. My wife is a PhD level engineer. She understands numbers. But money is an emotional conversation first, and all the numbers are a distant second. And so that was kind of when I woke up to the idea, like, oh, if I really want to provide the world I want my daughters to grow up in, I want to provide them with the horse lessons and the summer camps, and I want them to, have the abundance to be able to make mistakes and learn. I need to learn this emotional language to be able to love their mother and communicate with their mother and model that behavior to them. And so my entire practice in financial coaching, and this is true in my CPA firm that I own and operate as well, is I'm always looking at the human first. What is the story? What is the emotional charge? What are the hopes, dreams, fears? What are the things that they're bringing in from their past into this conversation?
Makes perfect sense. And, you look at how your wife and you model that relationship moving forward. Now, when you were having that spike the floor moment with the dish, that was in 2017 or so. So we've seen quite the
2015.
inflationary spiral. 2015.
Oh, yeah.
So, even I think that conversation today is all the more painful, right?
Oh, 100%. Like, stop and think about what money, if you understand, in brief, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You have your base level needs or your survival needs, then safety and security, then relationships, esteem, and self-actualization. Finances are the dirt we put that pyramid on, right? Like, everything is dependent on that. So when you're talking about money, you're talking about safety and security. You're talking about food, which of course is a biological fundamental need. You're talking about the ability to have relationships and say yes to opportunities. It's huge. And in an era of inflation, when eggs, are more expensive, twice as expensive, butter's going up in price, and then you're trying to raise two children, in my case, two daughters, where they're having healthy scratch cooked, meals, and now my grocery budget's twice. That's a conversation that's very delicate to have. And thankfully, from a financial standpoint, my wife and I have, we are making far more money than we did way back when the plate incident happened. And it's, we're still having a lot of the very same conversations. How are we going to do groceries? Should we look at these things in bulk? What is our eating out budget going to be? What do we have to say yes to? What do we have to say no to? Those conversations haven't changed, but the context in which we're having them has changed.
Well, and that's just getting through the day-to-day, life of food on the table, keeping the lights on, things like that. That's not even diving deeper into, I want to take a vacation next year, or I want to save for kids' college or things like that, right?
Oh, 100%. And from our human monkey brain, like our emotional state, like what's the base level programming we're all running around with, right? Find food, mate, stay away from the cougar. Full stop. Like we are handling a barrage of information 24/7 with a brain that was designed to find nuts in a forest, right? Like, so of course we want to, we're kind of forced into this place where we're all short-term thinking because we're in survival mode all the time. And, what's even worse, if I want to put on my tinfoil hat for a second, is it's highly profitable. right? If you can force consumers into short-term thinking where they're not thinking about college, they're just thinking about today, their behavior changes and it becomes hyper profitable for whoever's doing that. So then the question for me in the work is, well, how do we shift it in that we can do both? Because I don't think it's an either or conversation. I need to put food on the table, and I need to be able to make sure that when my daughter says, "Hey, Papa, I want to go to Harvard," that my answer is "fuck yes," rather than no. And I hope I can swear on here. So I didn't ask ahead of time.
For sure, my friend. Absolutely.
So that's the abundance that I want my children to grow up in. But that requires me as the leader of my household to do both.
Yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense. And I mean, you talk about back in the day, we were just scavenging. We were just trying to get food on the table for our kids. We as dads have that innate, need to support our family and provide for our family. And all these challenges that we're talking about really are profound from that perspective. But what can dads do to ease the burden of supporting their household? You're talking about just the little things. Where can they start, and how can they continue to ease that burden a little bit more?
Yeah, the first place I always take any client that comes in to talk about money is our first step is to breathe. There's this urge, and I've seen this in the dichotomy between men and women, right? Women will stick to a plan forever. They get freaked out about it, but they will march, but they want to know why they're marching. Whereas men, if I say, hey, here's our objective, they will eat rice and beans and crawl through broken glass, but they're also going to end up divorced. So our first step is we need to breathe and create space. It's the Viktor Frankl between stimulus and response is an opportunity to change the outcome. We have to breathe a second to just give ourselves that space. And then I think step 2 is let's just agree that we're not going to judge how we got here, right? There are so many times people say, oh, I shoulda, coulda, woulda done this. Well, that's great. Maybe that's true. Maybe there's some lessons there, but bringing forward that judgment only makes the future impossible. So we want to breathe and we want to start just letting go of some of the judgments. Yeah, I made mistakes. Great. Those were tuition payments. I maybe screwed up or, made a decision that if I had known differently, I would have done differently. Well, but you didn't know differently. So let's just let that go. And then once we're in that, now we got to look at it, right? We got to sit down and ask ourselves, what is our spending and what is our income? Do I actually have a spending problem or do I have an income problem? Professionally, I'm a tax accountant. Like I said, I run my own tax practice in small business accounting. So I spend the tax conversation all the time. But when we move over into financial coaching, people are like, oh, I saw on TikTok there was this cool strategy for taxes. And I'm on the other side going, you don't have a tax problem. You have an income problem. You don't have enough money for me to actually even bring you on as a client and try to do advanced tax planning with you. Let's talk about how do you raise your income? And it's those conversations and looking at it that will really formulate the actionable steps. Because if you have an income problem, that's what we got to talk about. You cannot budget your way out of poverty. I tried for 4 years. It does not work.